Nikki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. My guest today is Laura Stanczyk, a casting director and producer who has worked on Broadway and off-Broadway productions. She is now doing a course at Eastport Arts Center starting February 4th from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. called Scene Study for Beginning Actors. Thank you so much, Laura, for sitting down with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having us.
I want to talk a little bit first, before we get into the course that you're teaching that sounds fabulous, just about your background and the incredible work you've done. I know you're part of the Screen Actors Guild. Tell us a little bit about how your career got started, both as a casting director and producer.
It kind of roundabout. I was born in Michigan and raised in Michigan, went to the University of Michigan and was studying politics. And at a certain point, I had worked in Washington a couple of times as an intern, and I got kind of fed up with what I was seeing down there. And I decided to pursue my other passion, which was acting. So I went to New York University and I became an actor. And I was an actor in New York City for 14, 15 years, until I decided that the work I was doing, while I was modestly successful, I was not as successful as I wanted to be. And I decided to change my role and use a lot of the skills that I had learned at the University of Michigan, things that were a little more analytical, a little more bureaucratic, and become a casting director. And I learned the art of casting from a fellow called Jay Binder, who was a great, legendary casting director in New York City. And then after a few years with Jay, went out on my own. And began producing in a small way, did some executive producing, worked on a new musical, just finished executive producing a play in New York off Broadway. And in the midst of all that, I grew up in Michigan, and I'd lived in New York for 37 years and got really lonely for a different kind of environment, and had been coming up to Maine for vacations for many, many years. And made a decision that it was time to change my life once again. So started looking and focused on the Washington County coastal area, and sort of focused on Lubec and Eastport, and finally decided that Eastport was a place that I thought had enormous warmth and creativity, and there were a couple of organizations that drew me there, the Tides Institute and Museum of Art and the Eastport Arts Center. And I thought, if this community can support, this tiny community can support these two organizations, I'm going to be okay there. And so I was able to buy a couple of buildings on Water Street and opened a wine bar and a wine shop, which was really not in my sights. But things happen, and you change things up. And over the course of the last few years have begun to know the community in a deeper way. And we, the Machias Arts Center, Machias Arts Council, and the Eastport Arts Center have begun to collaborate on new theater and producing new plays, along with Stage East, which has been producing for many years. And it just occurred to me that there is so much theater production in this area, that it might be great if we had a little support for training. Mm-hmm. And that's how I wound up where I am.
Your life sounds a little bit like the plot of a great play or movie as well, when you say it like that. Tell us a little bit about what someone will take away from taking one of these courses. We think of Eastport as a sister community to St. Andrews. Mm-hmm. We have Broadway by the Sea here now in the summer months.
Very exciting.
Such a great opportunity from anyone from this region to take a course to better their skills. There's a lot more television production even going on in New Brunswick right now too. Mm-hmm. This is an 8-week course.
Yep.
Taught by someone who has also taught at Yale. I think this is important for people to know too. So the credentials that you're bringing just to this 8-week course are pretty incredible. What is a case study though, a scene study for an actor, and how does that sort of compare to other types of acting courses?
So it's a little bit more advanced than what you would think of as beginning acting, which can, always starts with basics like improvisation or a vocal technique or relaxation. It uses text because when you are actually trying to go on stage and actually work in something that exists in text, in a play or an episodic, you've got to take that material and in a way dissect it Figure out, there's, various different things. There's auditioning technique, but when you are trying to connect to a character, you have to be able to look at the text and figure out how it connects to you. And I think sometimes the biggest fallacy I have encountered with young actors is that they don't understand that the character is them. Right? Some people think that what they're trying to do is impersonate someone, or I have to play at something. The whole point with this particular course is to take text and to figure out how you attach to that character, what you identify with, what it is to walk in that character's shoes using what you know as a person who's existed on the earth for however many years you have been. And very often what you'll encounter, and what most young actors encounter, is a lot of, particularly young folks in their teens and their 20s, a lot of experiences they haven't had, right? And how do I attach to something extreme? How do I attach to a death? How do I attach to a birth? How do I attach to these things that I haven't actually experienced? And so we'll tease that out too. How do you find those things that make it ring true for you? And how do you move from moment to moment through a scene and create an arc?
Wow. And do you think that even a less experienced actor could take even, let's say, an extreme like a serial killer and find ways to relate to that role? Okay.
Totally. I was lucky in that my arc to becoming a casting director and a producer, and involved being an actor, and involved studying with some amazing people. One of the most important lessons I think that you can take away is comfort and acting don't go like this. You don't want to be comfortable. Being uncomfortable means that you've got something that doesn't quite fit in your body. And another teacher of mine, one of my favorite phrases was, don't take the moral path. You're not looking, as you're looking at a character, at what makes them ethical or moral. You're looking at what makes them tick. I personally think it's a very good way for all of us to channel our less than moral and ethical impulses and maybe understand them a little bit more.
I also find too, I always enjoy interviewing actors because I find they have a lot of empathy just because they've put themselves in the position of other people.
Yeah.
As an actor, what did you get out of the experience of acting? How did it enrich your life beyond just the stage?
Well, I think perception and that kind of empathy is the biggest thing. And I mean, maybe as a world, in the world today, if we could all take that away, what is it to walk in that person's shoes? And what in my life helps me understand your life or another person's life or another individual's experience? It's also the way Anne Lamott talks about writing, and so I think that this, can expand to almost all of the arts, trying to understand another's experience and take your own experience and bring it to somebody else's.
What do you think? Do you think people take your course sometimes not just to prepare themselves for the stage, but is there a lot that you can get out of taking an acting course? Let's say if it doesn't seem like the biggest connection to what you want to do next with it. Maybe it's a fear of public speaking. Can you get out of an acting course something that isn't quite so obvious?
I think so, because part of what you have to confront as an actor is nerves, right? And if you can learn and if you can acknowledge that all of that nervous energy in your body is just energy, and if you can embrace it instead of run from it or freeze up from it and use it for what's next, if you take a deep breath and put it in your voice, then you've got a real shot at public speaking. You've got a real shot at just talking to a room, sitting here with you, instead of going, oh my God, what am I going to say? I don't know what I'm going to say. I believe that these skills are important in life, and I think everybody can benefit from them.
When you work as a casting director, what are some of the key things you look for in an audition when you might have just 5-10 minutes experiencing someone's interpretation of a scene?
That is a great question. Two things. Ease. If somebody can walk in the room and sit down and be ready to work, right? If they have enough presence to just sit down and say, okay, let's look at this. I'm gonna dive in. And then the ability to listen. Because if you give somebody a note and the next take through the scene is exactly the same, and they can't learn how to interpret that note in a way that makes sense for them, they're never going to be able to work with a director. They have something stuck in their heads.
When we talk a little bit about, before the camera started rolling today, about how the pandemic changed a lot of things, that a lot of casting now is done on Zoom. It frees you up. Sometimes you can work from wherever in the world you happen to be, but the same can be said for actors as well, which I think would be another reason people might want to take your course. Aside from potentially starring in theater productions in our region, you can also be an actor and live in our part of the world and audition from your home, which I've learned from John Ralston and Karen Waddell, who are new residents of St. Andrews, and auditioning right from here, from their homes.
Particularly for film and television.
So how does that work now? Let's just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I can talk. One of my dearest friends just got a huge starring arc on the Chicago Fire, Chicago Med series from tape alone that she made in her apartment, and never left her home, and shot it in Chicago. This was much less regular before the pandemic, but I think studios and production companies and even producers of theater have learned that it's much, much cheaper for people to put everything on at home. And then, in the theater, what's happening is almost every, what we used to call a pre-screen or a pre-read, which would be work that you would just do with me, and I would decide whether or not I'd take you to the next step, whether or not you're ready for the director. And this, again, particularly with younger actors, this is not something we're going to do with established actors, but all of that is done online now, either by a Zoom or by tape. And with film and television, it's done by tape. Actors have the benefit sometimes of being able to edit their own tapes and send them in not just in one take, but again, for film and television, that's not so terrible because that's how it's done. You just need a good closet with some soundproofing and some decent lighting, and some good equipment, and you're golden. You can go from there.
And I think on the flip side of that, what's beautiful is it's taken a lot of these creative people that thought they had to be in these hubs and brought them all over North America, you to Eastport, which is wonderful. What is it like to work in a town like Eastport? It's so known for its art scene, but smaller. Is it refreshing to come across creative people just living their lives in the Northeast?
It's remarkably refreshing. I would be lying if I didn't say that there were people I didn't miss. I miss people from New York, but I don't miss New York City. I think of somebody like Jeff Daniels, who's lived in Michigan forever, right? He's never played the game, right? He's never lived in Los Angeles or New York. And now I think people are catching up with that kind of thinking. Living in Eastport is wonderful because there is a lack of pretension. I think sometimes when you get into entertainment at a professional level, people can work very hard at taking themselves very seriously. And when you encounter a fresher market, fresher is a really good word for it. People's enthusiasm is still so new, and their passion to do something is driven not by a need to pay their rent or a need to prove themselves. I went to college for this. I have to, prove to my parents that this is the right move. But because they want to, because they have that spark of divine fire. I think it's what Bernard Shaw used to call it. So,
Tell us a little bit about, this is just a side note, but I'm curious about your wine bar as well. Tell us a little bit about how that factored into your life in Eastport and how it's an outlet.
Well, it was a side note. I acquired these buildings and I didn't know what to do with them. So I met the wonderful folks Lisa and Jeff Smith at Horn Run Brewing, and they took over one side of it. And I was looking at this space that had this big staircase in the middle of it, and I thought, what am I going to do? What do I love? And I do love wine. And it's not something that Washington County has. I'm the only wine bar, not just the best wine bar, but I am the only wine bar in Washington County. And I think it's become kind of wonderful. It's become a place where actually we have salons. We have people come in and try out their material. I had a guy trying out his comedy set there once. I have a young woman who's writing a new musical, Cindy Gelada, with her husband Dan Reynolds, and she comes out and tries out songs. And because we have a nice grand piano in our what we call the living room space, and we have trivia night, and it's fun. It's bringing people together. It does give people a creative outlet, which I'm really happy about. But it's tasty while you do it.
Well, what's it called again for people who might be curious? And are you open year-round?
Yep, I am. It's Phoenix Fine Wines, and during the winter we're open Thursday through Sunday. And in May we'll go to 7 days a week and do what we can to make our nut. But like everybody else in Eastport, we're creating opportunities for the community to come together. And I don't know if it's the same for you guys here, but we talk about winter over there, the people who live there, we all love it because the community comes together and we celebrate this way of life in a smaller but far more intense way. In the summer, we're all working our butts off.
Exactly. It's like we all work on a cruise ship in the summer.
That's
winter
correct.
is our creative time. I say this all the time because I hate the cold, but I love winter. And no one understands that. I'm like, it's because when we're allowed to be creative.
It's amazing. The things one can do in winter it's really great.
Which is also why I love that you were doing this course in the winter, because I think it's the time of year. I know there's a memoir course that started in St. Andrews at the library in January, but to add to that, your acting course. So starting February 4th, it's $225 US, which I think is a great deal for your level of expertise for 8 weeks. It's 2.5 hours a session as well. So 6 p.m. it starts February 4th. How do people register if they're watching right now and want to be a part of this?
They should contact the Eastport Arts Center. You can certainly easily Google them or find them online. And there's a registration form right there. I don't think there's an actual phone number where one can reach people, but certainly Googling the Eastport Arts Center and reaching out to their Facebook page seems to be the best way.
What was it about the Eastport Arts Center that when you encountered it, you decided you wanted to be a part of it?
I think that it's community-based. The Arts Center is a place that really listens to the voices of its community. And it's got all these different constituent organizations. So there's Stage East, which is a theater-based organization. There was until very recently the Passamaquoddy Bay Symphony Orchestra, which is no more, which really breaks my heart. But there's Quoddy Voices, where it's a choral group where people sing. There is the Eastport Gallery, which is an artists' center, and there are all these different organizations which basically are there for the community's artistic needs. And they're not about, this is absolutely a not-for-profit organization. They don't make money. They just attend to the community's needs. And, there's some of the most wonderful things that happen there, like there's a Christmas tree auction in December that is the most charming thing where people make their own little Christmas trees and they all get auctioned off. And it's just incredibly charming and community-based.
What I think is truly special about having someone like you be a part of the Eastport Arts Center and just be a part of this part of the world is that you show a lot of people from this area that it's possible to have that line right to Broadway, to also live here at the same time if they choose to. What would your best advice be to someone who is thinking of going into acting or is maybe already pursuing it and hoping to make a full career out of it?
Stay open. It is a very hard career to make a living at. So while you're pursuing it, while you're auditioning, and audition wherever and whenever you can, and particularly at the beginning. When you're an established and professional actor, you don't want to go on auditions if you don't want the job. When you are young and starting out, go to anything, because you want that experience, or submit any kind of tape. You want the experience of having to go through that, because it's a particularly grueling process, auditioning. You got to get used to it. But stay open and be creative. Meet with your friends. Read plays out loud. You know, find a pal. If you can't take a scene study class, find a pal. Work on a scene. You know, Google Judi Dench and see what her advice is. You know, there are amazing actors who have made so many videos about what acting is that are available on YouTube or on Google. Do that. Just feed your creative spirit in whatever way you can, because it can be difficult to break in. There's not going to lie about that. But you want to keep those creative juices flowing while you're trying.
And I know this particular course is aimed at beginners. Scene study does sound like a very wonderful and intense way to get into acting if you're at the beginning stages. But you also have taught people in your career that would be considered advanced actors, award-winning actors. Why is it so important for actors to continue taking courses and to continue learning and fine-tuning what they do? Well,
to stretch themselves. I'm going to be honest. At a certain point, you know, if you are somebody who's been working on Broadway or in television for many, many years, you're not really taking courses anymore. But you continue to stretch yourself through the work, right? And oftentimes by taking gigs that scare you. Because the stuff that scares you, that's where you want to dig, right? And for people who are acting, who, you know, courses, it keeps you limber, and it also keeps you honest. It can be very easy to hide from the things that we're afraid of. And it can be easy to hide from things that challenge us. And so it's sometimes good to have an objective eye to say, "Ooh, that didn't feel honest." You know, let's dig a little bit there. Let's push that a little bit.
What would be your best advice for approaching a character as honestly as possible, even if it feels so far away from who you are?
Well, going to that text, right? I always say you're looking for a little nugget of gold, right? So if you're reading a play or you're reading an episodic, and when you get when you are hired to do film and television, very often you do not get the whole text. You get a scene. You get what they call the side. You get 4 pages. And you're left with that without understanding what the whole play is about, what the whole episode is about, what the arc of the character is. And you got to figure, you're a detective, right? So you have to go in there and find that one thing that you understand. Oh, I know about that. I know, you know, I had a sister who was disabled. That I get. And how do I expand from there? And you use your imagination, obviously, but you also use place and time. And, you know, we live in this extraordinary environment, and we are so lucky to live here. I think about that series Shetland that is, you know, set in the Shetland Islands. We have a similar environment. You know, if somebody were, you know, asked to do something like that, or Northern Exposure, this is a place where I understand what that feels like. I understand what that breath is like. anything like that can help you get into a scene or a side, but it's being a detective.
Well, I appreciate so much you coming in today. I hope many people sign up for your course. I know that the space is limited, but please feel free to come back anytime. I appreciate it so much.
I would love it. It's been a real pleasure, Vicki. I'm a big fan, a follower of yours on Facebook and Maud's. Love Maud.
So love to hear that.
Yes, and I think you guys are doing great work here.
My guest today has been Laura Stanczyk, who is putting on Scene Study for Beginning Actors at Eastport Arts Center beginning February 4th at 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. It is an 8-week course. Please look for it to sign up at Eastport Arts Center's website. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.